Recording in progress. Mani Padme Hung. Mani Padme Hung. Mani Padme Hung. Okay. Galar Rinpoche, when you're ready, we're here to do a sound and camera check. Morning, Galar Rinpoche. We can see the screen. Whenever you're
Oh,
ready, we're here.
good morning, Venerable. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you and I can see you. A little
Oh,
bit.
wonderful, wonderful. Okay, so Genrumache will be here within minutes.
Okay, thank you so much.
Welcome, welcome.
Recording in progress.
Good morning again, Rinpoche. Thank you for these precious teachings on the Rice Seedling Sutra. And good morning, Katrina Brooks. Thanks for your excellent translation, and welcome to all our online participants. We're happy you can join us. We have one or two or more teachings with Genla, and so if you'd like to make an offering to Geshe for his teachings, or to Katrina Brooks for the excellent translations, or to the Abbey for hosting the teachings, you'll find out how to do that in the chat box. And just something to look forward to. Through his tremendous kindness and generosity, Geshe Thabkhe has agreed to teach on Nagarjuna's precious garland. So after a short break with these teachings, keep an eye on the Abbey calendar for that sometime this spring. We'll begin with some preliminary prayers.
To the teacher endowed, transcendent destroyer, oneness gone, for destroyer, completely and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one gone to bliss, door of the world, supreme guide of beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, to you the Buddha endowed, transcendent destroyer, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings and go for refuge. When, O supreme among humans, you were born on this earth, you paced 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise, then I bow. With your bodies formed supremely fine, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best supreme guide, to you I bow. With a supreme science face like a spotless moon, color like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not incomparable, wise one, to you I bow. Great compassionate protector, all-knowing teacher, field of merit and good qualities, vast as an ocean, to the Tathagata I bow. Through purity, freeing from attachment, through virtue, freeing from the lower realms. Unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path to freedom too, well established in the trainees. The holy field endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha I bow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a bubble. A dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all-seeing, subdue the foe of faults, and be delivered from the ocean of cyclic existence, perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, foreland, sun and moon, immaculate you. May all beings enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Idam Guru Ratnamanda Kandiryatayami. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
This one?
This one again.
Oh, yeah. This. All right, huh? Mission do a color junjaba, Kunjur Shawa Chuba, the Shinshik. Wombo Shishin, Rapshi Shilla, Kenya, Shubatella Chasa. Oh, yeah. That's your neighbor Kulon. Oh, Simja Tamji. Dongele Trevesidora. Simja Tamji Kue Dongele Trevachawa. Trevor Chief Tumgegi. Langdor Jene Tamji. Shengengi Kunse, you de Kundengi Kibushi. Kibu Sanje Shichawa, you a chawa samsa. Or teach you do anything you chigi. Sanji Sumbe Chuya, Tabada Samba. Kombachan, any rimgi. Sanji Yukova Tobachagi, and Kuno Setam, Samba Shusa.
So, to begin with, we should set our motivation, thinking that in order to free sentient beings, to bring them out of the sufferings of samsara, I myself will strive to become a being who can teach all of the points of what is to be adopted and what is to be abandoned. I myself will become a Buddha. And in order to do that, I am going to, in stages, listen to this translated teaching of the Buddha, hear it, meditate, hear it, reflect on it, and meditate on it, and so that I might myself become a fully enlightened being. One should set a motivation for listening to the teachings.
Oh, yeah. I'm just something to less one. Oh, Minda Sugi Nuguti, a tag in my chest, said Shiba
Nare.
Minsu, the Sigora. Shiba Minda Su, Shipumbu, and Suji Pumbugi. This was Minda Sugi Nuguti, I say. Tag in my chest. Tag in my chest. Shangi my chest, Nige my chest. Wonjuk my chest, Duji my chest. Oh, Tandia. Tag my chest said they did it. Wakasura. Tangi Jawate, Jumele Jawate. Jumeba Tangile Jawatala Tagi, Java Eswara. The Tambimba Sanashi. Mobu Kangali Kuyo Marisa. Koran Shingi Tayam Esa. Oh, this wara. Tagi Cheva Mari, Koran Kim Eswara. Tag my chest. Oh, Tene. Oh, Tadiliati Mambuyungiva. Pecha as a shagora. Mobu Kangali Kuta Kenke Komaresa. Mabje Dong, Tata Pata Yavata to suit, 당게 송게 수요 말 고라 랑신 기도고야 됐어라. 세만은 넘버 요라 깡발 수용게 세만 넘버 단디 매가 샤스 다용스 체메 넘버 티야 네코 수송게 요 말에 고란데 랑신 차도 됐어라. 디나 신고 참데 참데래 주요 말에 다게 끼버래 세거라. 랑게 끼버래. 다들이야네 다게 끼어네 주 매버시 끼기나 아니 그뒤에나 다과 깨쳐라. 단단 전불인데 주 매발을 끼거라네 남게 컴라. 샤다든데 주 매발을 깨쳐라서라. 주밀에 깨나 따도 깨워타게 껴대온 거라. 말에 따도 끼고 말은 내일 뒤딜에 끼그래 뒤딜에 끼고 말에 롱바딜에 끼그래 딜에 끼고 말에서나 아니 딜에 끼딜에 매게 주생 가래서 뒤딜에 끼 뒤딜에 매게 주생 가래서 그 줄에 떠는 마도 생 주생 셴다 요 말아. 자고 주밀에 끼와 요나 유치를 끼나 유탐절을 끼고래. 암기싱도 어렵지네 차와 요나 맨날 탐절을 끼고라. 드니 뒤치를 끼는 탐절 끼고서. 찔레께 찔레 매게 루바카시기 카시 마제나 주세데 주다께를 뜨거래 대직 상상 차상 상상 끼고래 tel라 마산데 끼고 말해서 어디 껴치고라 주밀레께나 따도 껴다 깨나 따도 끼봐 유치레께나 유탐절레 끼고 뒤질레께나 뒤탐절레 끼고 교인데 줘요라 근데 마신에 어디 찔라나야
Mm. So picking up in the text, in the English we have, this is on page 9, beginning with, and that sprout of name and form was not made by itself, not made by another, not made by both, not made by Ishvara, not transformed by time, and it will go on. So here, when it comes to this sprout of name and form, and again, name is referring to the 4 other aggregates aside from form. So here, the first assertion is that it's not made by itself. So those who assert that things are self-arisen are really saying they arise without a cause, like the Charvakas, for example, who would say that things just naturally arise. Like, for example, if we look at the feathers of a peacock, they have that kind of elaborate coloring and so forth, or like the sharpness of a thorn, the roundness of a pea. There's nothing that we can say, oh, that's caused by this, but instead it's just sort of naturally like that. It's self-arisen. And so here they would assert that all phenomena can arise then without a cause. Now, in terms of refuting that idea, if we have this kind of arising of a phenomenon without a cause, then it would always have to arise, right? There couldn't be any differences in terms of, well, it arises in this place or it comes about at this time, but rather it would have to arise at all places or at all times, because again, there is no cause. To assert that kind of causeless production is really to say that things arise permanently. They would always have to be coming about. So for example, if you were to assert that, then like a mango tree wouldn't need heat. It could be arising in any place at any time. So here, obviously that's not how this works, but the main objection with the idea of being self-arisen, in this sense, arisen without a cause, is that it would always be coming about. You couldn't have things that are occasional, like occasionally in one place or occasionally at one time, but rather would always come about. If it's in one place, it's in all places. If at one time, at all times.
뭐야 근데 달에 깨셔야돼 그런 데 말이지 코란 레께 용기 연애시 거래 깨고야요 말 코란 담보 여차데 코란 깨고야요 말이지 거라 달에 깨셔야돼 랑게 규매발에 깨가 예세니 깨셔야 코란 데 말이지 깨나 교단 깨질을 때는 깨고래 빼나 까와 봉벌을 속만한 시에 거라
So here, the fallacy with saying something is self-arisen is then actually that you couldn't even say that it arises. If it already exists, if it is already there because it exists in and of itself, then to say that it is produced or arises actually contradicts that.
근데 다 셴레 미셔더라. 달에 지금 말에 셴레 지금 말에 쳐라. 셴레 메기 왔어야 돼. 가르쳐 버렸어. 양 치르봐 다 난게 집에 집에 다 세시오라 밀라 속바 주지 생기 된지 대세 다 지오라 밀라 속바 생기 된지 그래서 난게 집에 집으시오라 그래서 여발 때는 들어와다 더와다 내가 간거 죽비와 그래서라 어디 인도상고 다게 나게 집에 집을 생기 제봐야 말해서라 샬레 민세데 야 되다
So here then there is the not made by another. So here in this sense, there are those non-Buddhists who assert that there is a kind of self within beings. It's almost like an inert self, but it is the experiencer. It's kind of the one that enjoys or experiences all things, but it doesn't itself actually act. So here, this saying that it is sort of arisen from another in the sense that there is a self that is somehow other, that is the one that experiences this. This is the fault here.
저네 샬레 끼와대 태마르셔라 뒤나네 다 니가레 끼와 예스나 수고라 달레 마제나네 니가레 끼와 요요 마라 레레레 마제네 니가레 끼와대 태마르셔라 야
So then to say that it is not made by both, again, to have this, if you have eliminated the possibility of a self arising and showing the logical fallacy of that, and then also the kind of arising from a distinct other that is unconnected, if both of those are not acceptable, not logical, then again, it's not logical that it could be arisen from both self and other.
yeah, this was 그걸랬어 다게 마셔 생기 마셔라 이게 마셔야지 근데 원주기 마셔야지 원주라서 봐네 다들 제가 뭐 원주라서 봐대서 그 제발했으나 대 말해서 와라 너희와 것도 다 제발 다게 계속 냠도 메사서 다 되게 개발이 개발시에서 메사 달도 소한테 제발 너희와 돼 가지고 와 그래서 원주 마셔서 했잖아 원주라서 봐 다게네 그는 것도 단지 제발했으나 대 말해서 와라 뒤지 마주세라네 뒤기 왕게네 뒤딱 봐요래야 치료봐 뒤딱 본데 게오라 뒤딱 봐 왕게 니 구야다니 로야다니 마다요 뒤지기 용거스나 와 뒤지 준도 아마래서 와라 뒤세데 공업부 자와체단 칠 때네 맞아 파남샤신 데민도 샤거는 맞아 뒤 고랑 추티게 시기와 마라 너 뒤질라니야
So then continuing, so not made by itself, not made by another, not made by both, and not made by Ishvara. So here, it's not as though a creator, a kind of god like Ishvara, is the creator of all of these things. Particularly in this context, we have seen how it, as was listed above, it does not occur to the karma or to these various factors that they are performing these functions. There isn't this like thought or intention of a creator or otherwise that precedes the unfolding of this kind of dependent origination. So it is not made by Ishvara in the sense of some kind of will or intention that precedes it, that of a creator god. And then it is also not the case that these phenomena are transformed by time. And here, the non-Buddhist notion of time is some kind of like permanent force that somehow causes the unfolding of all of these various events. It's not the case that this permanent entity of time could act as a force in order to bring about the various changes. So this is opposed to the Buddhist notion of time, particularly the Prasangakas, as something that is a non-associated compositional factor, not to be considered something that is like a permanent force.
Oh yeah. 네 랑실에 맞추스도 사회 랑실에 지소를 맞추스오라. 장전 받아서 그 지소세 신고부 딱 받치와래. 데미도 지레 그 가르소라. 셈데마르 투도 투버서라. 데미도 좀 투도 투버다. 덴보데. 이나 되게 코콜로 요 말도 되게 고야 간거 되게 소그래 지소세 봐 가지고. 사회 랑실 지소 되게 맞아야 돼서라. 그걸로서 뭐 샬레메 Shile Machu Stira. I Chebala Raleba, my essence, then Chebabul Ralene Kevamare. Two Memene Kevamares, and the country resena, Reja, Agent of China, Patamani, Yuvata, Manda Santa Dembata. You are. And it can't send some my case on an Indian China. My head, you are not city shoot to this. Shiba may suit to Grace.
So then it says, not arisen from nature. Now here, this is referring to the kind of primal substance that is asserted by the Samkhyas, for example, that there is this kind of like stable, elastic, like this primal substance that then gives rise to various manifestations. This too, although it's not like those who assert a creator God and there's some kind of will, this as being like the nature from which everything arises, that is also not an acceptable proposition. And then not dependent on an agent and not born without a cause. Now, not dependent on an agent is like, again, some sort of creator, someone that is acting in order to make this happen. This is not the case, but rather, as it says, and it's not born without some kind of a cause. Nevertheless, if the mother and father unite, the time is fertile, and the other conditions are gathered, then because the causes and conditions are not deficient, then there will be giving rise to name and form and so forth. So if we are talking about womb birth, if all of the kind of conditions are right, the mother and father coming together and it being the right time and so forth, then there will be the arising of a name and form. It is not due to any of those other types of production as listed above.
Oh, yeah. Oh, talk about this. Oh, yeah, take this one. You some choras, my tetater. Yawadan Dembe, Sabi number Sheba, Tamida, Sugin, you go back to Oshawati, but this one. Oh, did this one? What is it, Lona?
No.
Mida Sug Shiba Misuti to Gresha.
No. So then here again, nevertheless, if the mother and father unite, the time is fertile, and the other conditions are gathered, then because the causes and conditions are not deficient in those dharmas without a governor, without the notion of mind, without grasping, equal to space, and having the essential nature of the mark of illusion, consciousness that is a seed that relishes in experience will produce the sprout of name and form in this and that mother's womb, the place of birth, reconnection. So here, describing the kind of process by which one takes rebirth, if all of the causes and conditions are gathered, then this will bring about name and form.
Oh, yeah, that is better chana shigwa. Mingda Sugin, you could do about to Gresha, Dita Desha. Tandilko Kachi to Tobacco Yora, Chiribada to Tobacco Yora. Karsugas Kira Samal Wang Yuchi Ta Messig to us, Chibabu Ta Mess. Taga Samlatan, Kulungu, your mana, Igresig to us, Chibabu, your Maras, Ta Mera. Te Kulun Samlatan, Keku Marisig to us. Te Natal Halake, Mele Kitchen, Le Mambo, your Vasa. Netezukanga, Tuchig Kigres or Kiwakanga. Alakele or Melikele or the Kumangu Yora. It is some Korake on Guina. Tashanda, Samlutange, Tawon, Yuchinge, Omare, Samlutan Songe, Tuchig do. Kiwamambo do be Kyo good race, Kerala. Yena ladly, I can't you. Sendilla Yuchora. Tonju you less. Kiwachima you egg Kenya you less. A teacher my delation, Landran Shella you less. And a till membership, Casura. 10 day came membership. Katukan attended membership called Mangi Bashura, Mangi Belashura, or Tinder Namshat Rungumares. Kiranchi, Babu Tas and get Kangalong, you can get Chita. Tis Samlutan, the young man. 교진 속바 잠비 용거 연다 깨와렌지가 교진 망부 초되어라 다 고란 줘야래 그래서 근데 대견대 줘 그래서 됐어도
Mhm. So then this is an example of like taking a rebirth, that when all of the causes and conditions come together, then that will come about. And so here, the kind of those that do assert the will of a creator as being necessary for this kind of production or rebirth, they have this sort of doubt. They say that well, even if there is no kind of creator, even if there is no sort of will of a creator that comes before, then won't this karma sort of all bring about its results all at once? So, for example, we can see that there are karmic actions that are the results of which are visible, will come about in this life. And then there are those kind of results leading to a birth as a god or as a human. And those that are experienced sort of with those next in the next life. And then there are those that are not certain. It may be in our next life or many lifetimes into the future. And they are sort of like, well, why is it that some would come about sooner than others? What is it that then causes that kind of difference between the karmas that we experience in this life, say, versus in a future life? So this is the kind of qualm that arises for those who would assert that there is a creator or some kind of will necessary to bring these things about.
뭐야 다가네 어다데 빼시리 쉐도아 다 당부 빼고네 쉐고라 당부 타녀보체네 용야티 빼샤니 쉐도아 데카르 쉐도스나 미게 넘버 쉐바 네 경알레 총디에서도 미게 넘버 쉐바다 보데 경알레 때니 총그레세 미게 넘버 쉐바데 수다 미게다 타게 테마타게다 나와다 어테졸레 때니 기고라 미게 넘버 쉐바 기와데 쳇델레 뇽유게 레게 펠샤요라 단다랑 쳇델레 가주 미게 따네 밀 짠 바조 나와차스네 수제 트라트 드마카시라 단다 용구도 예르부 마로와 자 쳇델이야 뇽와리 교회레 요레스 디페티 쉐요라 디카르시도스나 미게 넘버 쉐바 이 경알레 때네 총아레 쉐요라 경아데 가레스나 미글레 템바 때 미와 거라 미글레 템바 미경볼레 템바 아셰 미테네 가서라 미글레 템바 수다스 미겐데 유 미게 수데 거라 될 때구라 수다세 네 나와다세 미게 통에 있는 나와 거라 나군을 통고 말와 암조 녀도 있는 나군이나 맨나 케케요 말아 그래야다 칼사에네 케 상고 말아 이게 미게 넘버 쉐바야 중에 중대가 가시나 때 다게시고라 다게 메와라 템바 미게 수라 템바 와 근데 나와 나고 마이바 나와요바 나와다 쳬바 근데 남가 동상요거라 급샤네 팽마로 아트바지 급샤네 통마로 동상다세 데케바 일레쳬바 데마타게스라 디 타게스는 아주 수라지 따섬나 이디 티철 때고라 데마타게 이 셈데 페션다 질링데요나 미단데요나 통고마레 셈데 페션다 링데요나 데마타게스 고요라고 티철이 이디 때고라 미타야도 암조니에다 렉샤다 티줄파 초 이디 티철 마초나 이디 페션다 제데나 아니메타나 미시케로 시그마라 암조 티우마레 어디는 가라조 삼살 셈잉도 되고도 제 토마토도 셈도 바이도 어디서다 데마타게데 거레스고라 어디서를 때네 야게 고레세 가서도 예라 제발라야 때네 메게 넘버 쉐바 종오세 어디 봐도 칠라나가
So then here is following that is given an example of like the kind of karma that we are able to watch unfolding, like the karma that ripens in this life. And this is sort of an example of that. So for example, in this way, visual consciousness arises through 5 causes. So here, when we think about the arising of our various sense consciousnesses, they need things like the object condition, the dominant condition, the immediately preceding condition. All of these kinds of causes and conditions come together to give rise to, for example, visual consciousness. So this is sort of like an example of the kind of ripening of karma that we might see in this life. Here, it describes how visual consciousness arises through 5 causes. What are the 5? Depending on the eye, form, light, space, and attention produced from that, visual consciousness arises. Regarding that, the eye performs the function of the basis of visual consciousness. So we need to have the kind of dominant condition, the eye sense power, functioning eye sense power as a cause or a condition for giving rise to, for example, visual consciousness. And then there needs to be the object condition. So form is what can be taken as an object. So form performs the function of the image for visual consciousness. And then in order to be able to see something, we need to have light, right? So light performs the function of illumination. And space performs the function of non-obstruction. Again, if we have something like immediately touching our eye or too close, there's no way that we can actually perceive that. So space is necessary in the sense of performing the function of non-obstruction. And then attention produced from that performs the function of taking notice. And this is really getting at the immediately preceding condition in the sense that we have to be paying attention. If our mind is distracted to something else, then we can't pick up, say, a visual object. So in this case, like we can see that when our mind is distracted away, we don't necessarily register visual or auditory objects and so forth. And so the attention, really, this is getting at that immediately preceding kind of condition of the moment of consciousness that goes before. And attention then produced from that performs the function of taking notice.
뭐야? 다텔라 자와자다 시도와 미기 왕부도 가르쳐지 그래서 tel라 미네 미기 넘버 쉐바 tel라 미네 미기 넘버 쉐베 아니 가서 야 tel라 미네 쉐 tel라 미네 미기 넘버 쉐베 땡제 자와치도 다게 다게 지거라 개체셔라도 지거라 공부도 미와도 미 탄다면에 통하게 오마라 자와치도 세 네 수네 미기 넘버 쉐베 미그베 자와치도 미기 지거라 통해 수지거라 되면에 오마라 얘네 나와네 뭔배서 나와데 나고 얘네 통고 말아 나와 반나니마다 나와도 어르시네 미실 수 나와체 도그라 나토그라 나고 얘네 나토고 말아 나외 자와데 저래서 나와네 뭔배 자와치도 뭔배 세와치 통토베 자와치 아니 남바를 쉐바네 말에 남과네르바 남과네 미트베 자와치 남과 동상 거르바 배춘자데 연네 통 말아 즉바르 주네 바루 연 통마라 동바시고 군이 바루 동바거라 유대다 미 바루 동바거라 아니 남간에 미트베 샤와지 바루 팀게 즉바르 셴다 주니 트립제 통 마라 남과 동상 거르 군이 바루 들야 되네 대단 중화 예라 제바네 중화 예라 제바네 sambe chawacha ta yele chebadar tematagi yidirwa yidi dichola ten mado ko shetu mare nawara jene nala mangi bade dura nang thuge mare ba nage marwa sako tematagi sa dichola yidi tegura mi toya yena yi madani yo mare amjo yena ko samsala yi shenda ko de yena kese shena amago yongdo ho tisor o tibatu chilamna this one
Mm. So here then, as far as the like kind of function of each of those, again, regarding that, the eye performs the function of the basis of visual consciousness. So when it comes to the sort of dominant condition or the empowering condition of visual consciousness, one needs to have a kind of sense power, this visual sense power that is free from fault. If you have a faulty eye sense, there's no way that you can give rise to a visual consciousness. And so too, one needs to have the object condition, the proper kind of object, a form that can be taken taken as the object for visual consciousness. And then there needs to be light. Again, light forms the illumination and it creates the kind of conditions of illumination that allow us to be able to see. We need the sun, the moon, some sort of electric light, whatever it might be. But in darkness, we're not able to see. We can't actually perform that kind of function of visual consciousness. So light performs the function of illumination. It removes the kind of darkness such that we are able to actually see. And then we need to have space as a condition as well, in the sense that space performs the function of non-obstruction. So if we have something like pressed against our eye, we're not able to perceive that as a visual object. And so too, if there is something obstructing it, like a wall in the way, we can't have the visual consciousness of whatever object it might be. And so space is a necessary condition. And so too is having our mind attentive to that object. So this is really referring to the kind of attention in that our mind is pulled to take a notice of or attend to a particular object. We can see that if we are totally distracted, if our mind, like say we are distracted by something else, we might not hear what is being said, for example. And so one needs to have the function of attention or actually taking notice in order for that visual consciousness to arise.
Oh yeah. Oh, that make number sheba, Sugzimbe make number sheba kebala, can't in the Tanguru Eswara. Teta mena can't do Kayrochi Masana Nike Yomara. Teta mena make number sheba, Kyor Minjurki se. Kangese, Kangese, Nage Kechi, make Masawa Majurva. Majula, Deshin to Autumn, Meche, Tenkanga Chanson Sura, Deshin to Sultan, Nawata, Namka Tonsanta, Teda, Jua Yila Chebe, Yichi, Begita, Get and Mata, Get Nawata, Kanga Chansona Sura, Samara Jude, Tamjan Duvale, and the Karesna make a number ship on Jua Juro Osere. Or Tiba to Chilana, yeah.
No.
Loshan.
So here again, without those conditions, so when all of these conditions are assembled, then we can give rise to visual consciousness. But without those conditions, visual consciousness will not arise. But when the eye, the internal sense base, is not deficient, and similarly form, light, space, and attention produced from those that are not deficient, from the assemblage of all those, visual consciousness will arise. So here, in order to give rise to a visual consciousness, we have to have a functioning sense power. We have to have the proper object. We have to have the proper light and space and so forth. And if all of those things are assembled, then one is able to perceive visual forms.
Oh yeah. That tell a meaning to that it Rama Jambul Changmaluangenge, Rama Taba Chore Sora, Rama Tade Koyomare Changmaluang Yuchinge, T any Kulung Samlutan, the Loyo de Mena, and it is Kanga Yungu Mare Segura, Tete Yon took with Segura. Teta Mena, Sutanda Kento Masana, Teta Mena, Tage or Timare. Teta la mini se, Chebabota, Loyo de Bakawa, Titon del Segura. Dissemble Shawura. Tamjela Wang Jungenge, Tabe, Tawa Rawachi, or some Gora. Tina Shingarazo, Nalo, the Cogbin, Sosolaya, Rawe Tachi, some. Ti won't you chesser some Gora. Chita Yonza, Samalia won't you chinge, Tabe, Tawa Rawa, Sangma, Tapu Jangachi, or some Gora. Te ene samlu karatana tina shi yungo re samgura. Garanzo nga se na lo che ye sam shebu ti karu samna tina shi chi de chebu de ko de mas kanga chebu do tinde samlu ko yara. O ti ba me so tandal kande ne mabu char so atalia. Ela mini de nyam do ta ge ka se number shebe tenji chawa nyam do mesam so. Tinde samlu ko ma re so kyujin sana de yore so ra. And so young Dinyamdo Tane make a number shebe making checking some some look all my race. Now I am parking now then Dinyamdo Tane make a number shebala suit by Wimba. Number 7 chawa checking some tender some look all my race. Namgayan Dinyamdo Tiniparu Tong Sanderwa. Namgayan Dinyamdo Tage make a number sheba a la mitribe chawa chidu. Parutong bachi mebachi chala chune. Tipkirwa. Eko chawa che tongsan yense tipki marwa thongya mitribe chawa ne mesim sosa. Tetan jungwa yila cheba dige sora. Taage yila cheba yan dinyam do taage mege number shebe sambe chawa nyana sheya sora. Mege dige pige yudi toya hakoya te yidi tena yungudwa. Yi yaguche ma tena ne nala mangi ta San Matong get an alma attended and Simsosa. Make a number sheba dinyam do Tane, make a num shit oh Kanga, the Konzukuyake, so something, some like a comma, Kujin sounds on the Koran Rahama by Keo, good cigar. Number sheba dinyam do Tane can't the dog a case on yam to messim this. When Jan say, Judan can get a yubale, make a number sheba kyo. Kujin sounds on a coach, good what did the chin done? Yeah.
So, then it says, regarding that, it does not occur to the eye. I perform the function of the basis of visual consciousness. So again, here there is, for those non-Buddhist schools, they would assert that there is a kind of like autonomous, independent creator that has the ability to create whatever they might think, whatever they might will into existence. Now, this has been repeatedly kind of refuted through these same sort of going through, recognizing that each of the kind of causes and conditions, in this case for visual consciousness, doesn't have the sort of thought, the autonomous kind of independent will that says, oh, well, I'm performing this or that function. So there is that sense of a kind of creator that is autonomous and unitary and permanent, asserted by non-Buddhist schools, but we all have this in the sense of an I. Like we have this thought of having a kind of autonomous I that like just as we think we are able to do. But that isn't what actually accords with reality, as it explains here. Regarding that, it does not occur to the eye. I perform the function of the basis of visual consciousness. It does not occur to form. I perform the function of image for visual consciousness. It does not occur to light. I perform the function of illumination for visual consciousness. It does not occur to space. I perform the function of non-obstruction for visual consciousness. And it does not occur to attention produced from that. I perform the function of taking notice for visual consciousness. And it does not occur to visual consciousness. I am produced by these conditions. So it isn't as though each of these has this kind of sense of or autonomy, a kind of will or drive behind them. Yet, nevertheless, when these conditions are present, visual consciousness will be born. Likewise, this applies as appropriate to the remaining sense organs as well. So here, although there is no such will or kind of drive of a creator, when all of the causes and conditions are present, then these things will come about, like, for example, visual consciousness.
Oh, yeah. That Deshindo, Ombo Lama Namla, Chirisu Charo Suda, and that Megi number Sheba Su Tonzula, Kianga Chikudo Tinashi, and now Ombo Sena Tinashi, Neo Ombo Che Ombo, Lujo Ombo Tozu Tension Spachana, now Ombo Tatavalea, now the Kugumarwa, now Winakashana Kodura. Shanda de Kaya Yunia to Tongmara, Timparu Tomba Manda, Sipa Jabsha, Chipe Kashan, Tugmara. Tinashina on Bolatana, Naguna Timakara, Kalsayana Sachora, Literature Yungra. Oh, that is a Chirgispa, Charge Tinashi. To the gate at the Tansona, big number show, another number show, Namshiki Ungris. Geshe to give you something Sangumare. Can get Namshiti and Nakonji something Sambako Mari Kujin Tansona, Koki Ungris, Tibacha Jura, yeah.
So again, likewise, this applies as appropriate to the remaining sense organs as well. So all of these, just as like for our visual consciousness, we need the proper kind of causes and conditions assembled. So too for our auditory consciousness. Now, this is, it applies as appropriate to the remaining sense organs. It's not as though we need the condition of light in order to be able to hear. We are able to hear in the darkness, but we still need to have the kind of conditions of space, of functioning sense power, and so forth. If there is something obstructing our ability to get that sound, then we're not going to have a kind of auditory consciousness. And so too with our sense of smell and taste, these two don't need illumination, or our touch. We are able to do that even in darkness. But it also does not need to be preceded by this kind of thought, or, oh, I'm performing such and such a function, or this the visual consciousness or whatever consciousness thinking I was arisen from such and such causes. This happens in the absence of that kind of will.
Oh, yeah. That on the Karishek do Senatiro Akasura. Oh, Tandim Toshets. Oh, Tunda P. You didn't in the Tansona Koke Unguresi, Tication Buresegora. Mado de Chebabo Samla Tugumarese. You can't desert, the chick Matana Kigmare, the Ganga Sanson Kigris. You don't get Korangi one gets over there, Mato Shandak. You may assembly, you may the top of your met in the Tugmare, stick Okura. Oh, teacher, yeah.
So here, before we get into this next part, it's really emphasizing the fact that when the causes and conditions are complete, then something will come about, even in the absence of the kind of will of a creator God or their intention as such. But rather, when all of the causes and conditions are complete, then that phenomena will arise. And so this is really the main point that is being made here, is the necessity of looking at just the aggregation of those causes and conditions as how phenomena are produced.
Oh, yeah. That the nature Gaya should to the way. Should get you all there. Oh, that did it. Oh, God. Yeah. The Cavalleso. Soon it temperature. Oh, they did it. Tell a church Gaya should go. Oh, yeah. Tell a church Gaya. Jiden dinen Jiden Paruto. Mepo make oh, church Gaya. Jiden dinen Jiden Paruto Pogmares ora. And Pogmares do Carsigorasana. And then Arazo Samlana Cardos and Samsa. Joachima Landuzanga Tire some Sosotande te drag Samluraj Kugdoa. The Poya Yomaris a tina dad midi. Joachima Tundru Hara Chikayana. And they depart midi pigin run and mere. Are Niga Ingesuru Chagdoa. Copen Jurne, Koran Chima Manda Cage and Judurmado. Nandangazu Ted with the Sopo de the Pandu Marua. Tiendu in any pigachima. Yo Langetting as a meat and there's some little Geshe. Net don't do it and do some against the Kedura. Pecuni Kagarava. The name don't get it, Tanda Tata, Mamba Yuni Kagasoza, Pondo Marisa, Pondosina, come and Jurija began to there. Chiruban the Genecotis, some give a rakashe. Tade, Tabachibu Ramache, so would Maranalo Coranteora, Cocoran Katu Yanshandajana, Sobona Persia, Roshana Shira. But then drive your Marisa, Kudan Yang Commander Madame Koran Chick Chili Chick Tuni Chick Kini, Pandrosha Resura. Then Angazo Mami do Japan Hakodo. Mami Padusa, Mami Pashabati Pachote, La Shu, Tel Shu, Kumudua, Koran Kenshin, and Yibaki, or Sumbaki, or Shibaki, or Numda, Toreda, Koran Sosabato, Neko Chi, Madame Koran Keungramato, Titina Poke Kumudua. Oh, Tiken the Kugura Konyele Sigora, Meta Mana Yungumara, Ture Mana Yungumara, no Mana Yungumara. Yinako, just a Kadulia, Chikichele, Namati Yebe, Kengi Chimachi, Levy, Kona Yungur, Tinto Gora. What do they with the bigger phone Drote Kayamara, or Tisua. Jiden Paru to Mapu Merki, Mepo Merki, Kudake, Kudake Masama Meba, maybe legend Drepung by Yodo, Kujan Kanga Sansona, Lela Ten, Drebunya Yada, Tondo, that Tewatunga Kanga, you are the Sigura. Oh, to Garsudan. Drebu Yodo Ose. Ya teach it, Lamna.
Mm. So, here then, regarding that, while indeed no dharma at all passes from this world to the next, because causes and conditions are not deficient, the result of karma appears. So here we generally where it talks about then the nothing passes at all from this world to the next. We have this kind of thought of I, and it seems to us that this I, this self that we have, like this will go to the next life. Like I right now am a human, but maybe I will become a god in my next life, or an animal, or whatever it might be. But we have this sense that there's this I that's going to remain, that will be there in the next life, that will somehow be like transferred or passed through to our next life. And this obviously is not a logical kind of conclusion. If it were the case that we, as a human, this I that we have right now, were to pass to being a god, then we would somehow have to be both a god and a human. So here, when it comes to the kind of way in which we move to our next life, the self of now, this kind of I sense of I that we have right now, doesn't unchanging without transformation transfer to the next life, but rather is constantly shifting and subject to this kind of flow of causes and conditions. So here, it's not, again, as though we move from this life into the next life, we sort of like transfer or pass through, but are constantly kind of changing. Each moment is a change and a transformation. So we could think about it like in terms of a butter lamp. We can see the flame of a butter lamp, but it's not as though that flame is like transferring one moment to the next, is moving one moment to the next, but rather due to the kind of aggregation of these causes and conditions. We need to have a proper amount of oil, something that starts the fire, and so forth. For as long as those causes and conditions are assembled, then that will continue. And so too, when it comes to how we go on and take rebirth, how we move to a new life, it's in dependence upon our karma and all the kind of karmas that we have accumulated. But it's not as though there is something of this life that like transfers, is moved, passes through to the next life, but rather when all of the causes and conditions are not deficient, then the result of karma appears.
Oh, yeah. Then I'm not to some not interest to Angemane, some gra, oh, Dani, the butch and interest. Gema, you better thunder day, Omarwa. Thunder, you better, oh, Nasani teacher, the Maoba teaching us. Thunder, you better Maobanaco, Tirsuche, Tegmara, Titanziri, Dora. Yama de Thunder Kawayora, Yona, Puchunju de Thunder Yokora. Now me Kokbana, you get the Thunder Yokora. Yomara, Tisama Yomara. Can go, Thunder can go to Yama Yomara, Nangamane, Loti, can go Yamane Yomara. Tanda vede anga shani nani pe tanda lochi jisi jema denge tirsu sedo tanda yeba de mahobana ko denge suraja de tirsu sedo so ngama de majibu se tanda yeba de tagba sedo so ti tanda yeba so ti mandruge ti yo mare shege ora ya
So we have this kind of sense most of the time, like, oh, I was here in the past, my prior self, and I'm going to do this tomorrow, and so forth. We have this grasping at permanence. Like we think, oh, when I was a child, well, in that form of a child, that child form has not continued on to now. And so too, when we have become old, it's not as though we were old from the beginning. But there is this sense of an I that is somehow like remaining constant. This feeling that the I that I was before is the same I that I am now, not recognizing the kind of constant flow of change. We have this sense of holding to a kind of permanence.
뭐야 다 단다 빼대 가르셔고서나 제 델리아 단다 타 녀부체 메기 소통에 남시기 그래 자체에 남시기 그래 제로를 잔제에 남시가 단다 괜찮이 끼고도 이 빼대 가르서나 어때나시 통주 연구가 레요 레서 챈데라래야 레산에 챈데라야 녀아디오에 레요 요레서 이 빼대 거네 셰겨라 통주 연구지 레 예베 빼래 셰겨라 빼고네 셰겨라 통주년조 챈딜이야 레산에 챈딜에 드레붕요하시거라 내가 저 샘블샤고라 그나 남중아 저 샘비 삼로시다 샘벨레르와 인터넷 대왕게 르게 자와다 나게 계제셔다 강가 약부지 쉬어세기나 도가 쉬어세기나 샘비 샘바데게 삼바나 시치거라 일레 레스요라 사체데베 레스타 사바르즈라 카디에나 삼로 간데타나 레 샘벨레 Give Cholina, Migi Cholina, Lumading Cholina, the Basim Chungisiora, Isabellera, Teletan and Ludanga, Kona, Collocation to Jasha, Yabushe, Rockwache, Karasam, Lunga Konechuba, Tina Shiche, Lerwa. It's Sendelia, Yabuche, and Sendela Debu, your Esigora. Nothing as a Chimachi, didn't do Musici to the Matuni Yora. Then a Mikashe, Tambunina Lobson Yabuche, Sambuche, teacher. Tishaji shining at Chimat and the Chego, some coach, Tinashi, Yabuche, College, and Yayungura. Yigitiere, Chaya, Lopson, Kagachi, Chimako, Sambanashi, Karina, Tonda, the Due Yungudua. Today, reach your race, Tonjo Yulera. Kasha Tujashi, Samlutan, the Tujashi, the Sedelico, Tupe Mambo, Yora. Le Sendele Cheta Madu, and Lemut, Tonjo Yulera. So Lele Tendeche, your race, Gora. Sengamana Sashabeta, Sendela Sabe legend, Debu Mim Hatubashe, and Mahombale, Aminget, and I made it under Minget and Rayora. Or Tezutelia, Tenekan, and you the Leshandati ora. So Le Debuchi city, but the Yoba Chebabus and Shanda sometimes you matter. Garazo send the Kosum Gila, Jebel Tene Kosum Gidu, Chawasangi, Kangayong, Tugudoa. Okay, then it said the leg in Trebuki, I don't assume to true years yet, Namdu Yungutua. Oh, Tina shit in it, going on massage of a cashe, in the or a land, Namsa trash it out there. Sanjay Chimato did chassis to Marwa. That and then dig it. Tonju Yurgi lay a pet share, oh teacher. Tangan the Kenyan Yugi lay a peshegora, the water, hotel.
So here, this is giving the example. I mean, for example, the visual consciousness, when all of the causes and conditions come together, then we give rise to a visual consciousness. And so too, we can have, when all of the kind of causes and conditions come together, the ripening of karmas that we have created in this life. So these are those kinds of actions that we have created that are going to bring about results that are visible to us, that are apparent to us. So when we have any kind of thought, we are creating karma that is intention, and then the intended karma that the kinds of actions of body and speech that are driven by that motivation, that intention. And so we are creating karma all the time with what we think, with what we do with our body and our speech. And so we can see that, for example, someone who might have the thought of like, I really want to do well in this life. I want to learn this particular thing. I want to achieve this particular goal. And by making effort at study, they are able to achieve that. That is something that is we are able to observe the results of those sorts of actions ripening in this life. We can see sometimes there are people who do really negative sorts of actions, and they are experiencing the results of those negative actions in this life. So this is sort of like visible karma, or karma that is apparent to us. Now, sometimes the things that we have done in the past, those kinds of karmas that we have accumulated in previous lives, those will create ripening results in future lives. And so knowing the various subtleties of karma is something that is sort of beyond our scope, but establishing the relationship between causes and effect can be done through this kind of looking at the results that ripen for causes that we created in the very same life. We can kind of establish the connection between those causes and their ripening result that happen in the same life. Now, for what comes below, this will be talking about the kind of karmas that we experience in a future life, having taken rebirth, how those come about.
Oh yeah. 당한 좀 되셔다. 걔네는 요게 레에 빼듯이거라. 센델에 매매저 겨와 제마들. 센델에 사벨에 겨와 제마들이야네. 내게 남이긴 대부매에 되셔거라. 걔네는 요게 레세거라. 좀 그래. 야. 단 데이터 대해서도 페나 랍도 치베스 대pecha거라. 페나 랍도 치베 멜론게 kengo 라서도 장마 인게서라 나보이는 동구 말로 장마서도 멜론 야보 치체 쉐고 동다서들 샤보치나 이때나 동대는 세버치 동구라 랍도 치베 멜론게 kengo 라 신기수 신수의 소소 동으로와 동게 송에 나와야 남게레스 제신기 송에데 신 멜론게 나도 마페 메게세 이가도 동게 차셔로 지피기날 멜론안 루요 말와 얘는 루요 말 코란 교진 산디피가 차려 거라 곰다 트다 니마르 지샤네 티 아니 차르사텔 초다 정부다 지가요다 출루사 내자로 거제 팀붐 거제 이렇게 뒤치도 고샤용 것도 와 티날 로나네 코란 되네 지세도 그래 뉴르도 가시요래 디르도에게 요 말에 밖에 로고 말에 규진 상선의 버저데 투비용 거래시거라 예다데 페나 랍도 쳬베 멜롱게 징고라 신기 송에 나와야 신 멜롱게 나도 마포메게세 이 차셔로 지티나 반도요 말 코라 규진 상도 잔이 비게 투비용 거래 이게 교단께 마상아 매베셔 신동어 봐야데 규진 상선은 그 제신기 송에데 세버제 통용 거라 뭐 봐야 요도세 대신도 데네야 소냐 시표나 시표가 멜라 데네 속분하는 거라 시도서 속분하는 치터 동게르시 해변나오샤기오라 데 시표 엔테네 파조치나레 깨와데 데네 쇼도야르지 소소 쇼도베 나오요라 데마레 고지레레레 찍셀리 찍트 코란지레 루요라마도 오야 대신도 데네자 소야 시표바 멜라 셴도야 마제데 교단께 마상와 매베체 레지 드레붕은 바야 요도스 교치마 교와 카르라나 틸라야 요레스오라 돈다소 데 시르바토 제나 교알란데 코타 데탄다 요베테라 마주르체파 슈 팅도산드레쇼라 풍부디 지르마토 다지오 마레신 로샤오라 지나신 도야 요 마레사 다이나다 카레나 ngo보코라 교단께 그 치마치마치 겐도고야로 마도 저 때때나 바 슈도야시오 마레소라 야 어디질로나
So then here, this next example, the next set of examples is giving a kind of how it is that karma that we experience having taken rebirth. So we can have the kind of karma that we experience in this very life when the causes and conditions come together. And then there is that which we will experience in a future life, having taken rebirth. So here, and it says, well, indeed, regarding that, while indeed no dharma at all passes from this world to the next, because causes and conditions are not deficient, the result of karma appears. Thus, for example, though the reflection of a face appears in the orb of a clean mirror, while indeed the face is not transferred to the mirror, because the causes and conditions are not deficient, a face appears. So here, likewise, no one departs from this world and is born in another, but because the causes and conditions are not deficient, the result of karma appears. So here, in the same way that we saw, like for a visual consciousness to arise, we need to have all of the causes and conditions present. So too, like this example, in order to have the reflection of a face in a mirror, you need to have the mirror be clean and the face close to the mirror and so forth. If all of the causes and conditions are complete, then you are going to see a reflection of a face in that mirror. And it's not as though the face is somehow like transferred to the mirror, but rather when the causes and conditions come about, then you are going to have that kind of reflection. And so too, it's not as though there is the I, the self of this life that somehow is transferred to a new life. It's not as though one is able to, like the aggregates that one has now are kind of moved to or passed through to a new life. But yet there is this constant continuity of this constantly changing kind of object. So although, and the other example will come below of like the moon shining into all of these various vessels, when those causes and conditions are right, then you are going to see the appearance of such a reflection. But there is no self that passes through. It's not as though there is the like kind of self of this life that is somehow self-contained, self-sufficient, and then appears in a future life, but rather it is the case that there is this continuity of constantly changing moments that then when the causes and conditions are right, it will lead to the results of karma appearing.
Oh yeah. Tande kene nyon yoge le yebe pete shegdwa pete kone kene kyawandele ma chimanyo yagele tende yodes kene nyon yote yo. O desendo dene ja shipe tende so. Juda ke ma sa me chele je Drepung ba yo to se. Tiba tende so.
Yes.
Oche. O ta dene pena se tande rida karsere. Lendran shenla nyon yoge le yebe pete nge ora. Lendran shenla Kyawa chima member che te chema kanya rwa. Lendran shanla nyongyo se de kyawa chima de member che te sumba shiba nga ba kya ton chimbu karyo na te lendran te nyongje ki le de la lendran shanla nyongyo ki le se rwa. Kyawa lendran changa shanda shanla nyongyo le. O te yobe pe she gara te yores. Te ta ringbu re chine te she de koko yora. Pena dawe kengu ne se dawe kengu ya ta ringbu yora. Pase shiti tingne rote sine royo re sangaran zambulele tote. Enja ne chungu chu kanwa dawe kengur sunye nawaya ne chungu chulu shayuna ya shegura chena sora chena karina sunye de char tungbengi ngobu china tina kanga chagra tuchi tu chagra ne chungu chu kanwa dawe chu kanwa res kanwa nalas gora dawe kengur ji sunye nawayan dawe kengur ne tene mape me so dawe kengur ige yebe tene ma yon je tene shu do ra tene yo mara tene ne shebu jung goden gorgira in jogo le do ko koran de tinge sana namsa charung gora kengur ke sunye nawayan dawe kengur ne tene 마페 메게선 어디네 만데 용고 말에 네 총고 추 강외 나도 송야 매매게 이네 용데 티나로랴 슈드에레 텐데게 요 말에서라 아네 조단께 마상와 매베 셔 다웨 kin고도 응바야 요도세 멜로나게 가바이나 추네다 티나라 그 다웨 kin고 송예데 통그레서 오라 세버제 제신도 되네자 수양 시표바 메라 샹도야 메포 메게 교단께 마상와 매베서 내진 Drepung 바야 요도세 어디서라 다던다 the Basra Landa Shallan you do less as one. Kenny you do Landa Shallan you do less shake door. Oh, Tibo to Chidona, yeah.
So then the next example, again, here we have the example, the first was the karma that is experienced in this life, where we create the karma and experience its result in this life. And then the example of a reflection of a face in a mirror is the kind of karma that is experienced in the very next life, having taken rebirth, what one experiences. And then next we have the example of the kind of karma that is not definite to be experienced in the next life, but may be experienced in any of the lives beyond that. So here it says, for example, thus, for example, the orb of the moon wanders 42,000 yojanas above. Nevertheless, the reflection of the orb of the moon appears in a small vessel filled with water, even though the orb of the moon is not transferred from that place. So, while indeed the moon does not go inside the small water-filled vessel, because the causes and conditions are not deficient, the orb of the moon appears. And so here again, when you have something like a vessel of water and the moon is above, if the causes and conditions are right, there will be a reflection of that moon in whatever sort of vessel has something reflective in it, whatever is a suitable kind of place for that to arise. It's not as though the moon itself like enters into all of these different vessels, or it's not as though there is some kind of transference, but even in the absence of that, when the causes and conditions are not deficient, as it says, then we are going to see a reflection of the orb of the moon. And so likewise, again, while indeed no one departs from this world and is born in another, because causes and conditions are not deficient, the result of karma appears. So even when we have something that is so far away as the moon, when the causes and conditions are right, that is going to lead to the reflection of that moon in various types of vessels. And so too with our karma, even if it is something that has been accumulated in the past, when the causes and conditions are correct, it will ripen. Likewise, indeed, while indeed no one departs from this world and is born in another, because causes and conditions are not deficient, the result of karma appears.
Oh, yeah. Tante nga zo nyawar juwa mange bele pes chen shekdwa. Pendele tene nyawar juwa mange bele yose. Chichane drebu nyongure chichane nyongumare. Pena mege bele reche saane shauto mambu chene. Tontu reche kye reche na ko shauto mambu chene. Drebu meba cha yongura. Yan mele keche le reche yona ko tikba mambu sa kondu mambu chene. Mange bache drebu nyawa meba cha durwa. Thabkhe sigura tende yomar chikchena Drepung yongure chikchena Drepung yongumare o ti trandisa mange bele sigura nyo nemi Drepung nyoye tende mebate chikchena yongure chikchena yongumare o ti shegyo da pede o tende kawale so pena mene gyudan ke Machana member ke kyudan ke chokbale baros medajina kyujin machana bagmara kyudan ke chansuna ne member ayongura dida de pena mene kyudan ke machana member ke kyudan ke chokbale baro deshindo tabo mebe chöse deshindo tabo mebe chö dagi meba 대신도 따보 매배 쳐서야데 다가서다 지den지 가서 원주라 서버 따보 매배쳐 강갈 원주 챙게 나이 생애 서빈 삼사자 소에 따보 매배쳐 다게 매배쳐 되게 왕자도 붙이러와 이와 따보 매나 대 왕자 대 용고 말아 짐바 매바세 데 다게 진질라 발 때니 좋아 다게 tin데 거래 tin데 거 말에서 samlutan suna chung suna te zimba samle wang chung tende yo mare zimba meba namka ta chung ba se rangshin ge tong ba re Rama chi ta chi de Rama ngo so ya tende yo mar shu nam rang shin ji tong ba de so ra rang shin ji ka le so nam ga da chung ba so de rang shin tong ba che kyu me chen ni ji rang shin ta la se kyu ma ken de ta da lang bu ta ke ba da pe me ma bu chu gi ra ko chu ba na shin de yo ma ro wa chu ba na shin yo ma re de ko kyu da ke chang so na ko kyu ma de ke gi ra yin rin bu te tende yo se ge ra o te na shin temper mena ya chuto ko chibabu mena ya temper mena ya rawa chi mena ya gyudan kin sandu tinde yongyo re sigora gyume chenyi je rashi tala gyudan kin churku che ore gyudan kin nam masawa mebe shere masawa mebe shere ne kewe ne nyezam chorwe kene karale nyezam lada me yawa tundu kari kene kigre sara nyezam chorwe maye nge ta tanda de maye mindre chi rina chiki kasa nge ki ina maye nge ma teda tere sabyo nambar sheba leda nyomo namgi keba ase shiba mingsu di shigora mingda sugi nyungo ba drupti teda na nāngi tēnchī drēbar chūwa kēntān drēwara tāwa hōsa o nāngi tēnchī drēbar chūwa kāntē chīna ko kyūtān kēntān drēwa tē tāku rē samku rē sa shēpa bō tāng rāwa chī yuwa tīndē rāwa wē shēpa bō chī tā rāwa wē shēpa bō ku chīngi lamni chūwa tīndē yuwa mā rē sa o tibō tu chīndē na.
So, here, then, there are, again, we have the kind of karma that is experienced in this life or that will be experienced in a future life. And then we can talk about the kind of karma that isn't certain. For example, if one, you may have created the karma to, say, be born as an animal, but through engaging in confession, in the practice of purification, you are able to eliminate that kind of karma, have it not bring about its result. So when it comes to karma, there is that which is not definite to be experienced in the sense that through the practice of purification or other means, it can not be made to not bring about its result. So here, then we turn to the next passage, which says, thus, for example, fire does not flame when causes and conditions are deficient, but from causes and conditions gathering, fire flames. So similarly, because causes and conditions are not deficient in those dharmas that are, and I'm just going to read this through first, so that are not so similarly, because causes and conditions are not deficient in those dharmas, without a governor, without the notion mine, without grasping, equal to space and having the essential nature of the mark of illusion, a consciousness that is a seed germinated by karma and defilement produces the sprout of name and form in this or that mother's womb, the place of birth, reconnection. So here it is the case that when these causes and conditions are not deficient, in those, and here it says those dharmas without a governor. Again, this is referring to those that are without some kind of a creator. We have this sense sometimes that there's like an autonomous, independent kind of creator that makes all of these various things. Now, these dharmas are without such a governor or without such a creator, without the notion of mine and without grasping. So here we might have the sense that it is due to the sort of blessings or the sort of empowerment by a self that is somehow truly existent, that these things have some kind of a notion of mine or exist in the way that they are grasped. And so this as well, these dharmas lack that kind of mine or the object at which one grasps. And then here where it says equal to space, these dharmas are space-like in the sense of they're not having some kind of inherent nature. They are empty of that inherent nature, sort of space-like in that way. And then, and having the essential nature of the mark of illusion, in the sense that they appear one way but don't actually exist in that way. Such dharmas that, again, are without a governor, without the notion mine, and so forth. They are able to. You can have this kind of causality, wherein a consciousness that is a seed germinated by karma and defilement produces the sprout of name and form in this or that mother's womb. Now here, this is specifically talking about the fourth link of name and form in the context of womb birth. And so this is the way in which that comes about, not through some sort of autonomous, independent kind of a self, but when all the causes and conditions are present, when they are not deficient.
Oh yeah. Tatela nange tension driver jo nambangar tates. Nange tente tutolia tenja nambangae konde shegdoa. Nga kanshena se. Takbar mayin badas. Ta nange tension driver jo de keure dati. Prevenal tamuchi lapsatin gode lagumare. Nange tension driver jo takbar mayin ba cheba mayin ba so ne kanga nange tension driver jo kogura. Oh kanshena se. Takbar mayin badas. Chebar mayin badas. 네. 포와 많이 받아. 교총을 대부 신분 중하다. 대단 자외 교도 오 생각에 건데 시에도 나게 된지 좀 좋아. 오야 다들 가서래. 지들 딱바 많이 신나서. 지들 딱바 많이 신나서 딱바 많이 배출지 나게 된지 좀 근데 시에거서나. 강게 저를 탐에 치외 풍부 남자 신라서 나가라도 치외 내갑래지네 치외 내갑지 풍부가가 다 대주 상마시고라 이 현다지에서 단다 미제라 다 제말하리 게르지나 게외 차도에 풍부 남자신데 제말하리 게기나 야 전도 게기나 지게기나 대양 풍부 현다르와 지바마라 게외 차도와 남자신데서 아니 타마 치외 풍부 강인 바더니세 타마 단다 치외 풍부 다다 로바 소소데 미디스고라 때 제마 마레소라 타마 치외 풍부 강인 바더니 깨외 차르도베 풍부남 마인라스 마인지스 그게 사바로와 데탄당아 주요더라 어때네 타메 치외 풍부 남자 가라스 타메 단다 치외 풍부도 가급한 가그라 윤도라 가라 아니 깨외 차르도베 풍부남 중에서 띠분 가서나 아니 깨외 차르도베 된 중국에서 뒤단다 망가버지 반주예요 말아 뒤에서 딱봐 많이 넣어서 어디 디네 나게 된지 잡아줘 디네 봉게한테 다 피게 여반이들 배가가래서 산대 여바데 마주르제 퍼져 피게야 좋아라요 말해서 거라 포아 말해서 거다 마주르제 단다 간주 삼르나 여반나시 만 디네 네 피게 두레 삼 소수데 피게 드레서 삼르 코고도 하대요 말아 샤라서 니 치외 본부 남장가 돼서 깨외 차도 왜 본부 남장 중에 대실 딱봐 많이 넣어서 어디지 로나 야 되게 이제 다른 로차 돼서 야
So then so this is the way in which we should see internal dependent arising. So in that way, the dependence on conditions of internal dependent arising is to be seen. Now, regarding that, internal dependent arising is to be seen as fivefold. And here, we did this in English as well, but this kind of needs to carry down to all of these, that it doesn't say internal dependent arising again and again, but we should understand that this is what it is referring to. And so it is to be seen as fivefold. And what five? Not eternalism, not annihilation, not transmigration. A great result arises from a small cause and the continuity of what is similar to that. And so the first then says, how is internal dependent arising not eternalism? Well, because the aggregates of death are one and those partaking of birth are another. So precisely those which are the aggregates of death, the kind of aggregates that we have at the time of death, those cease and the aggregates partaking of birth arise. Therefore, internal dependent arising is not eternalism. So at the time that one dies, the kind of aggregates that one has at that point are not going to remain, are not going to transfer or go into the next life. So precisely those at the time of death are not those that will partake of rebirth. And so here, because of the fact that there are the aggregates that one has at the time of death in one life and the kind of aggregates that one takes up during birth in another life are not the same. Therefore, we can say that this is not eternalism. It's not some kind of permanence.
Oh yeah. 다 지다르서 나게때 진짜발 중한테서 오라. 지다르 체바 많이 신나서 체베 수기 지금 말해서 오라. 그 가래서는 담에 치외 풍부 남장은 가라서 당당 아주 풍부 지어라. 집행엘 방가 담보 방가 차르체 전에 가찬 동바충 살아. 전에 전에 치마도 용해도 말해서 오라. gen가네 참지 체네 야고 용나네 günde 체네 고용 거라. 이래 말해서 오라. 담에 치외 풍부 남장은 가라. 가발레 이네 깨외 차도 풍부 남 치순 중 말해서 오라. 마이세 근데 풍부마 깨외 내가 당배 당대 풍부도 좀 망가봐시 아니 치마도 연구를 해서 대 말해서 오라. 망가발레 좀 마이게세 담에 당대 깨와 담하게 네 치외 풍부 남장가라세 개인지 체에서 각배체 깨외 차도 풍부 남 연구를 dünyam을 해서 오라. sen데 풍부도 좀 각바되다 아니 치매 풍부도 좀 중화돼 dünyam에 수기래 마도 지den가 잘 gün지 동바지샤 gün체 아니 하사바지 중나 체버지오라 체버 말해서 gün튜닝 그래서 오라. 상대 도매주도 빼자라. 상쟁계는 초질이야 잘라 망을로서는 지대 야겨그라. 지대 야겨보다 지대 만도 dünyam을 마도 지대 마 랩차네는 제만고 야안도 된대요 말에 dinnashi chibarese dünyam beçere tambe chiwe pungbu nam gagwada kyoa chime pungbu nam jungade dünyam rese ngamade gyunche ne jungwa marese ora gala gyunye geze chime gasure kewe chardo we pungbu nam sangde tome sudu jungwa gyudi tejere cheba mayino so tibodo chinda.
So then next, how is internal dependent arising not annihilation? Well, the aggregates of birth do not arise from aggregates of death that have already ceased, and the aggregates of birth do not arise from the aggregates of death that have not yet ceased. So here, if one were to have the aggregates of death cease, like the continuity is cut, there would be no continuation. You couldn't have the arising of the new aggregates at the time of birth. And nor is it the case that you can have the aggregates of birth arise in the absence of those aggregates of death having ceased. So here, instead of that, but when the aggregates of death cease, at that very moment, the aggregates partaking of birth arise like the high and low ends of a balance beam, or like a scale. When you have this kind of scale, when one end goes up and the other simultaneously goes down. So here too, when it comes to the aggregates of birth, they can't come about if you have cut the continuity of the aggregates at the time of death. If that's really severed and there's sort of like an empty space and then the arising of new aggregates, that's not logical, that's not tenable. But nor is it the case that we could have the arising of the aggregates of birth in the absence of those aggregates of death having ceased. So the ceasing of the aggregates of death and the moment of taking the new aggregates of birth are like the two ends of a scale. It has to happen simultaneously. You can't have the continuum be cut, but nor could you have new aggregates arise in the absence of the cessation of the old aggregates. So thus, internal dependent arising is not annihilation.
Oh yeah, 다 제대로 포함만 신나서 봐. 나그때 제대로 좀 포함하래서. 그래서는 semjanji mendrawane kewa nyambe semjanji ri ta tanda nga zo mine 내가 친히 할게 베쿠셔라 원투다나 심전지 리면저 단다 미디 리면저 지로 개와냠베 지마 라인데 자고 하다 개와냠바로와 미다 개와냠바 마로와 지데 라레서 지데 미레서라 어디데 심전지 리면저와 단다 미네세 ene 개와냠베 하다 개와냠베 개와치마다 하다 개와냠바 와 개와냠바 개베세 네 ngombar trube ti cher po minus donda kyawan dene phonge de da chema yongge ni de dwen draw rim mitum bebe khaga re so dene de ram pige po yina ne danda me bana shi chema me yin ko ro pige yobate ni me da riktum ba yin ko ro la da riktum ba ri mara chema de la le ne la da riktum donde ne donde riktum re do ra ti che po ma yin no sa ya ti chi laksha.
So then how is it not transmigration? Well, from different species of beings arises birth in a common species, and therefore internal dependent arising is not transmigration. So here there are various different types of beings. We are now a human, but we could in the future take birth as a god or as an animal. And it's not as though the being that we are now as a human somehow transfers to that new kind of being, because we see that different species, one could have been a human in the past and then become a different type of being in the future. And because those are different, they are distinct, they are totally like different types of beings, it's not as though there is a transmigration, as though the human being is somehow transferred into being a god. So this is as well for internal dependent arising, it's not a matter of transmigration.
Oh yeah, 다 나게 던진 제발 좋아한테 지다를 교총을 대부총을 컨테스 총그래서 나서라 교총을 대부 첨부 컨테스 총그래서나 내 총을 제발에 대부 대부 첨부 넘버 멤버 용대에서라 내 총을 제 그나 콘도 깨지 찍서 콘도 딱보러 비세제 깨지 찍서 지나야 제마데 대부들이야 아니 야와다 근데 걔는 요즘 못하고 차기라 야한테나 시페 서반도 공야 같이 그런 상보 시비지 땅제 개발랍 첨부지 깨지 가셔지 사바이나야 로 까마치 니시나를 사바이나 야 까마가 주나 사바이나 제만 대부대 요즘 분야에 요라 자 나게 개와다 대베레데 춘주지를 삼비와 말에서 대근 대부 빼 첨부 지그래서 유령 분야고에 연구돼서 대송교라 지다를 교총을 대부 첨부 중시나 내 총을 제발에 대부 넘버 멤버 첨부 연구돼서 오라 대실 교총을 대부 넘버 대부 첨부 넘버 도바 주돼서 지다를 용화를 교회 내 제바 대다를 지레다 지질 옵션에 뒤버도 다시 생각하세요. 교총을 대부분 뭔가 두보세요.
No. So then regarding internal dependent arising, how does a great result arise from a small cause? Well, one experiences the ripening of a great result from performing a small karma. So therefore, a great result is produced from a small cause. So here we see how just a moment of really intense anger, although we were only in that kind of intense anger for a moment, it can lead to the result of a ripening result of being a hell being for quite a long time. And so too, on the other hand, when it comes to something like having patience, having a good motivation and engaging in patience, even a few moments, a few minutes of doing that can bring about quite a large ripening result. So we shouldn't think, like we shouldn't sort of disregard karma that we think is small or insignificant, like, oh, that's not important, it's not really going to bring a result, but rather even when it comes to the kind of good or bad causes that we create, the small causes lead to great results. So we shouldn't disregard them.
Oh yeah, this was. Then they now get attention to what you want. Chungule debu shampoo chunguris. The tie you get your draw some joa. Oh, yeah, the cheat and the lepe. 교총을 대부 전부 기교열에서 신 나주다세 배찬송도 상계 구파出行的 야마 지주지와 배천부 기도 신대 어딜 신 나주다세도 디사변의 충주지마도 면도 디파답샤나 빼야 전부 디나신 파를 자천부 던데 기그래서 치 던데리아 교총을 지게야 대부 배천부 기교열에서 디 나게 던데리아 딜레자 네 딜레자 중차해서라 교총종을 대부 전부 딜레자 펠치와 기그래서 yeah.
No. So here, when it was when we were talking about external dependent arising, for this fourth kind of characteristic of causes, that a small cause leads to a great result, we talked about the Nyagroda tree, which is something that the Buddha spoke about. This tree being one that, like most trees, I think, have quite a small seed, but it leads to a huge tree, both going upward and outward. This kind of great result arises from a small cause. And when it comes to then internal dependent arising, this is even more the case. It's even greater kind of ability for a small cause to affect a very large result.
Oh yeah. That did that. They don't drive you to Chuasedra. Take us to oh yeah. Chidar nyon juve le karasavna le kewe le chisavna debu dewaya nyawa kewan juve le chisavna mikichula soba tende ko nyawa kigra lada mili kechig le chisavna kewa savna lada mili kigra tingi komne le chisavna samde tambu niba soba kawai ni kigra oti inde chidar nyon juve le cheba tedar nyon juve debu number me banyowe 대체를 대단 드라베 규도세 규단 드라베 대부 규치기그마도 규멘라지 때문에 대부 men라지 연구 말해서 그나 치료지 뭐 신도를 때문에 대대 구슈기가 말아 어디나시 그래서 대단 드라베 규기그래서 내 기대 간다 간 제베나 대단 준비 대부 기그래서 야 되지로
And then finally, whatever type of karma is performed, the corresponding ripening is experienced. So there is therefore a continuity of what is similar to that. So here, when it comes to internal dependent arising, the same as external dependent arising, there is a continuity of a cause that is similar to the result. That kind of similar result will be brought about. So if we create a negative karma, it is going to bring about a bad result, say being born in a hell realm. If we create positive good karma, we will lead to happier rebirths as, say, a god. If we develop the meditative stabilization, that kind of immovable karma through our meditative equipoise, then that's going to lead to rebirth in the form or formless realms. So when it comes to the kind of causes that we create, the results are going to be of a similar type or a corresponding kind of type.
Oh yeah, talk about this one. Oh, the Dante did this one. That's in Basharibu, Tension Deborah Jonga, Chumde, Deji Yang Dabar Sumba De, Kan Lala Shiki, Yang Daba, Shebe Shirabji, Tedar Yang Daba, Chitawa Shindo, Takbar, Tatita, you can do Saswan, oh, Tezukanga, to Takbar Gundo, Sidu. 두타도 규마 쳐봐 시거라 두타도 규마 쳐봐 근도 소매바 다스 소다 드와 다스 어디다 단데 니 지부바 근도 바디 바카고도 젠세시요 방아죠 어디 데카레스는 지부바 근도 바텔이야 소자데 상마 탐절 소요레스도 홍보요레스 소댕가라 좀 미세나 신 소레시스도 semyorese 왕보요레 사말 왕보요레 소자 탐제 소자 상계 gangaresi도 신다도 사말이야 소요레 sem요레세다라 왕보요레세 카셸 왕보 두가상 카셸 왕보가 카셸 왕보시 카셸 왕보직 렉자 렉바마도 매게텐데 찍도 건져 어디 인데 또 통마 탐제 송대레서 소다 제버레시거라 이 말에 송거라 그나 중간중 남주나 요거 봐 중심 주제 심대인데 로마콤데 녀에 실시라 건다 그 중심게 릭지 봐 로마콤 봐 콤주고도 와 님만 맞아 쇼게 님만 와고 거야 쇼샤고도 와 쇼게 랑용거에서 맨날 건다 거니 쿠테 그래서 근데 그 대신 가져래 락바톤에 봐 콤주야 된대 요라 가셔 주게한 거 요라 뜻은 중앙기 왕게래서 나바잖아 님의 외다 된대 왕게 거치고 요래서라 내 건조 때 sem여네 녀와다 랑바다 된대 삼스탄도 와 된대 되시거든 되소다 제바래서 참절을 써요래 왕보요래 세대도 야 뒤질랍나
So then, this next passage begins, Reverend Shariputra, whoever, by means of perfect discriminating insight, and just so you know, the order in the Tibetan and the English comes quite differently, sees this dependent arising perfectly taught by the Blessed One accordingly, in reality, continuous in perpetuity. So the first of these is that it is something that is constant or continuous. This nature of dependent arising is not something that was created by the Buddha teaching it, but is something that is the reality all the time, continuous in perpetuity. So that's the first of these terms. And then it says, without life, free of life. And this is particularly getting at the kind of assertions made by, say, for example, the Jains. Now, the Jains would say that all things have life, as in like even plants and trees have this kind of life force, that they have faculties, one could say, in the way that we have like our five sense powers, although not all of these other living things necessarily have all five of those faculties. They may only have, say, the faculty of touch. They would assert that, well, like look at these trees, for example. Sometimes they will sort of bend their leaves closed at night, or like put them down, and when the light comes up in the morning, like us humans, we get up out of bed, these leaves will come back up. There are some plants that respond to touch, for example, and so they would say that, well, look, they have faculties, they are alive, this kind of life force pervades all phenomena, well, particularly like they would include plants and that as living matter. Now, according to the Buddhist assertion, they would say that those sorts of functions are really just functions of the elements. It doesn't entail that plants have consciousness just because, say, for example, their leaves respond to light and so forth. So here, where it is saying that whoever sees by by means of perfect discriminating insight sees this dependent arising as without life, in this or free of life, is again refuting the ideas that are put forth by, like, for example, the Jains.
Oh yeah. Oh, do karsura. Nga to chena. Te so ke mares nyinda da tinde wangeres. Ko so da tunge yona. Shingdabjine chena ko to mende ba da chik sana da chik namgyu chi tangi wer te ke tan me do asigora. Ene konzo de chene tumne yang tabshana yang chi do asigora. Semyo sa shingde chene yang tabshana. Te ke yebe ngeba yo marese. Yang la me karsura. Yang ja chene tumne chena so yo ba ta ti mena so mebe ngeba ke yo marese. Mi sonde ge yang la rubchine chene yang tabshana lakba chetin de che yo marwa. So ti kyusen ke do yo mare. Tanda o tezo kangan jungwe wang ge yong ye do wa. To karsura. Azu cha ra chi wa cha chi ge ti chene cha la chungju zu tengi do wa ti de sha ne zu ten do ra ko. To kabli se gra. Ko kab do ba jo sha cha de ti sha ko zu ten yo do. Ti koran jungwa da tin de ne be wang ge chi chi le jwa dra yo ra. O tin de ge se. O ti ma do karsura. So ye be wang ge. Eta sem ye be wang ge ma re se. Ta yena nga zo yang di nangba ge so se na sem da lu ni su ne be cha chi le so se ge ra. Ti yo ma ro chu shin to so ya. Chitaya de so yes, Chishange Udote, Mazun Duana Tichiware, Chunali Kitenge Shinji, Shingsmare, Sarachiware, Gombrese, Chunalia Ketegre, and the Chukorandus, Chunyam do, Jude Rumbu or the dos Tedegritus. They Chunanayatana, Kokam Dugra, but they in the Zancote, Jawachube Kodu Duanalia, de la Soyers, Chunatana, Jawachuba Yungurese. Karasnako saw the chula never is at the Rishihoria. Then the Kishin to the saw yes and a Koranke de Shingdajina Kotsa Tumna Kamdura. Then they told us saw yes and a Simliebe, the Simda Luni draw saw the matter, Mother Chidako Kishin, Sishina tells to the saw Senako, Shida Tanyatana Madreseke Homara. Duena Lati Unguatanda, saw chula never in Besera. So Zawal never so Zaw the Cheshan ko come dura or Tijilam.
So here, as for example, in the case of Janes, who would say, like, looking at plants and trees and so forth, that the kind of movements that they engage in are a sign of their having some sort of life, or maybe they would even want to say that they have kind of consciousness. Now, this, as opposed to, in opposition to that kind of view, the Buddhists would assert that those are really just sort of functions of the elements. Like, for example, if one is to say, well, a tree must be alive because when you cut it, if you were to cut off the top of the tree and you sort of put that in the soil, it might be able to regrow. It has this kind of life in it, such that it is able to regrow. Well, if you want to assert that that's the way in which we determine whether something is alive, well, if you chop off a human's limb, it's not like we can just sort of plant that arm and it will grow again, but we all would still assert that humans are conscious. So in this kind of example of like plants and so forth, to say that they are, and like, I guess we might not be able to register it, but if it were the case that, say, a tree had consciousness, when we chop that tree, there should be some sort of signal of its distress somehow. Like if we were creating suffering by cutting down that tree, it should be something that is readily available to us. So we can see that there are other examples that we can give of cases where there could be movement or things that look like there's some sort of life force, but it's really just a power of the elements. Like, for example, a magnet. When you have something that is a magnet, it can draw metal things toward it. It can create that kind of movement, but this is not something that is a sign of there being some kind of consciousness. It's not due to having life force. But here, when we are talking about what it means to be alive, this is really the sense of having a body and mind together. Now, we might need to make a kind of distinction between something that is alive in the sense of a term that is more broadly applicable to things like plants, and then being sort of conscious. So for something to be alive doesn't necessarily mean that it needs to be conscious. But when we talk about at least the kind of Buddhist understanding of what life is, in the sense of this term, like without life or with life, life is really referring to when those body and mind are functioning together, and so taking away or that life force is not something that comes from some sort of like all-pervasive reality, but is when when that particular body and mind are together. So here the question of something alive versus something being conscious is an important kind of a question.
Oh yeah, what did you mister? I saw maybe said, Alia saw the main Tanera, so and I saw Shane, Ravi. Maybe I can tell each other, what did you love Shannon?
So, and also to say like without life, we could refer to, rather than those other kind of questions, as life is referring to some kind of like an autonomous, independent self. In that way, we sort of perceive that we have this kind of self that exists by itself.
Oh yeah, don't you tell you, don't try to do that. Yeah, don't about you less. So that chita bunyi dance. Oh, the chidar tala never nashire sajara. Na manoro ani dance, or tender sheba de manoro race, take you send the shigara. Manowata. Majiba dance. Oh, tender. Well, teach you need to chill up Altamba.
So then, again, this perfect discriminating insight, which sees this dependent arising perfectly, again, as being without life, free of life, and then just as it is as in the way that accords with reality, and unerring as well, unmistakenly. Again, these two terms are quite similar, but sees dependent arising as it is without any kind of mistake.
Oh, Majiba, the Tundamba Majiba Shero. And then Majua said, oh, Tanda Majua in a Gemat in the Chunyu Resena. Oh, dear Gema Majua Resera. Oh, yeah. What did you love?
So then continuing, sees this as unborn, as like ultimately unarisen, sorry, or unborn, unproduced. And then unarisen is referring to, well, okay, you're saying it's not born now, but maybe it came about in the past, was produced in the past. This too, it didn't come about due to some sort of inherent in the past either.
Oh, yeah, Tinicora. No, Majabata, Majota, Cavalista. What and do much Majabata Resa. And do much of the Asera. Kujin Mambun do Balatene. Order. Well, Shandy Majak and Ashe. Oh, Chebabola Sabatindra on Cheveras or Tezo. Kujin Dube Chever, Tondam Bacheveras, Tondamba Kujin Dube and Macheveras, and the Chandra, yeah. Talk my meba dance. The Tongma meba net in the race. Tama Yomarva, Toma meba. Mikba meba sida, Tantambara, and the Kanga, Ganzo Meshin Bakares, and the Shanto Maris, Trebata, Trebanganzo, Tenzin, Shaji, and Toto Yomara. Mikba meba is the Toto with the ace at this. Mikba meba, what did you love?
So here again, going through this now unarisen and then not made, as in not created by some kind of creator God, and then unconditioned in the sense that, again, not the sort of fabrication or creation of some sort of autonomous actor, but rather is due to the coming together of those causes and conditions. And then unobstructed here as referring to this is understood in a way that is a direct kind of realization, free of the grasping at signs, the sort of normal grasping at true existence or grasping at signs.
Oh, Janetary Dwakasur. Shiva said, Shiva said, Karchan Komgo Senate, Tungetam Shiva Shiva Sonsan, take Komna, and if Pangiri, Shiva said, Sudwa, Shiva Sishera. Oh, Tene, Jipame, take Tomge, Su Congra, Tame, Chebabo me, Tissanane, Tanya Tamja, and Dadu to say, and the thing Jibaki, she race. The Comgan some share do the China Tana, your Marisana, Comgan Yungu Marisana, or take Comgo de Kashel Jibaki or de Tengone Conan Jiba Tamja Shiva top details and Jiba Meba, Shigamato Jiba Yungu Marisagora, teacher.
So, sorry, I should have also said baseless in the sense of being objectless. So it's not obstructed with respect to the nature of reality, and it's baseless or objectless in the sense of not grasping at signs. And this is then referred to, and again, we're talking about this perfect discriminating insight that is seeing dependent arising. This is referred to as peaceful, as by meditating on this dependent arising, one leads to the pacification of all suffering. And then the next is fearless. This really, if one has the correct kind of understanding, will not have any kind of fear. Although for some, when they hear that there is no self, that there is no creator or no kind of agent that is in charge, there will be a sense of fear of like, well, what is there left? When one has the proper kind of understanding, it actually brings about a state in which one no longer has any sort of fear. So it is fearless.
Oh yeah. Tate jikba shayate tongpa ni tende kashali jikba chayate yora. Tende ko tagi chegu yora. Kasha yombo no rene jikba chigu mare te jikba shihe tabshi tere samgerwa. Jikba chenge tende ene ko nega ko tongpa ni ten yo marwa. Tile raksanda rakbanda tene. Ta shayate pungbule takba re. Pungbule losu ta yo mare sere. Pungbule ten shambe ta mebara chi shena ti pengira. O tichilanya. 정말 때 로마로 텐데 요마라 동반이 템버 섭소 제구르 세티라 카셜리 직바 케네코 체다로에 냐가 요라 야
So, in teaching emptiness, there are those who maybe of sharp faculties will not feel any kind of fear, or at least none of this sort of negative kind of fear. But for some students, this is something where if you were to teach them emptiness, the kind of most subtle emptiness right away, it would actually be detrimental to them. So for some, it is better to teach this in a more coarse kind of way, such that they don't give rise to this kind of fear. So to teach the absence of a self that is totally separate and apart from the aggregates, or to teach more coarse levels of emptiness is better for those who might be harmed by immediately teaching the most subtle level of emptiness.
어 미촉 바세더라 어 담보코 텐데 제네 동반다바 텐데 코 하코네 시수 미케베 셴예다 저거 냠바테냐 컨트롤라서 버텐데 케네 키라 동해 녀모 시원 조 말에서나 어 동반이 꿈베 로데 초고 말에 셴다가 미촉 바세 셴다가 밤에버 소토고 말에서 알으시라 에네 세바 메바다세 세바 메바다세 가르쳐서네 오 텐데 오이 지레 디코 가르쳐래 근데 샌도야 요 말에서 세바 메바다세 tile chayin biwa. O karsara. Melam shindu, zimbo imba chi seba mewa. Ya, tendigiri, teji lapshana.
So,
Mitrokwa shari. No.
mitrokpare. So this is not something that is to be taken away. So here, if you have developed a proper understanding of emptiness, at least with some level of stability, this can't be sort of taken away by others. Like if later you were to meet a non-virtuous spiritual friend, that kind of proper understanding isn't something that can be stolen or can be taken away. And then this is something that is, as it says here, not exhausted. So it's not as though the kind of continuum of this is cut. This is something that remains at all times.
뭐야, 다 가발렸어.
Number
안되면서. 남바시와 말이 베라셰도 동하다 레소 아테데소. 근데 매바다 소 매바다 소다 섭다데 닝부 매바르지 고도 송마세 고 닝부시다 매거리죠. 근데 섭세데 고 미너시 섭세샤 다와스 민드라브세샤데 섭토스요라 대조 다다와 고 닝부 매바세죠 고 닝부 매바다 내다 내신도 고 단도 대보요나 남산 메테 와서야 데다 데서 나자지가 명이서라 데다 네 송우다세 제 남산 송우 매발에 송우 깨다 딕바다 딕바다 어느 거래 메다바다 미다보다 동해와다 동바다 다음에 봐 양다바 치수 통화되네 다 내배 어려다 미다 동해 동 담매를 써봐 라오에 다음에 봐 통소나 아니 되게 다 내배 되나 단단한 줄을 가서 라오와 시세 근데 마오바나 가르겨와 가르라도네 텐데 삼루 마부여라 간데질이 끼고나서 어텐데 삼루 또 용거 말을 숨겨라 다 내배 되나 중화시간 원데 내배 되나 마 중화시간 다 내배 되나 지시도 주로 다 내배 되나 다디 살초네 되그래 살초네 카메라 다 내배 되나 지다 보신 주르냠도 메도고 오세 텐데 동반이 통선을 세워라 저준에서 야보시나 다 마음에 되나 지다 버린 주로 근데 다 마음에 되나 중화하면 주로 마음에 되나 지른 주로 마음에 되나 지다 보시던 주르냠에 탈라메도 다 단다 라오에 다 여바 삼데 텐데 삼로테 매버차겨라 텐데 주르냠 말고 대지 다 디우치야 텐데 디치시에세 디치다 보시 지른 주로 텐데 심전되다 간내원 심전도도 담보 간내용어를 삼 라오에 삼로 코시거라 데네 시편에 간도 도와를 주로 냠바다로 텐데 삼로테 용마레 시거도 디버도 찔람나 디 오만 대산데 그래 다 조도야 애지
So,
대산데 그래
oh.
야
So here, then, again, so as this is whoever sees this dependent arising perfectly as an essential nature that is not pacified. This isn't something that is removed or pacified through the application of an antidote. And then the next list and regards it as and all of these are sort of terms for without essence. And the list that is given here is slightly different than what is actually in the text. I'm not sure where they're getting some of these, but and regards it as non-existent, trifling, hollow, without essence, and then diseased, infected, a thorn, evil, impermanent, suffering, empty, and selfless. He does not reflect upon the past. So here, someone who has had this kind of understanding of dependent arising that regards it as something that is then not truly existent, not sort of substantially existent in the way that we normally hold it to. So all of these are terms for without essence. And there's a term here in this list that usually means rice. Here it seems to be the name of some kind of a disease. So someone here who has had this kind of development of discerning wisdom, who has is no longer holding to this autonomously existent self, he does not reflect upon the past. Did I exist in the past or did I not exist in the past? What was I in the past? How was I in the past? So again, this is for someone who does not see this autonomously existent self. They've come to realize it to be empty. They will not hold these sorts of ideas of like, well, how was I in the past? What was I in the past? And nor will they reflect upon the future. Will I exist in the future or not exist in the future? In the future, what will I become? In the future, how will I exist? So this is the kind of understanding of someone who has realized emptiness.
야 단디 로션데 지데나 따와 타데보다 마부요래 시다다 드라메다 마부요라 지데나 개종함세 잠세함세데 젠다 남바도돌 개종요라 럽도 종요라 티서 잠세도돌 친도도세 잠세 타데바 강다요바 따따와 타데 마부요 따도 마와단 덴바 따요세 심제도 마와단 덴바 소도 마와단 덴바 데네 강사도 마와단 덴바 따도도 되게 राववे ता तेजु कागजा ट्रशी सुया ट्रशी माशिता ते ट्रशी बेतार ते ट्रमेशी बेतार तेंदे माबुशे हुतो तेजु दि तेवेरा ट्रशी मावाता से ने दंबता जा रोंदे से हागबो योवाता लागबार योवाता तेते गेबादा shumbale से दा यो गेबा shumba 안데रे तो जो योसो शेने चावाना चेते से अने ताले गो जेबा शेदो राशिदो मेके मेगा बे चेजेदो 요로 쯤바샤리 뭐 강라 서바 데 따보다 데데 땡제 데버는 좋아 양다바 콘도 슈베 Tishinsheba, Tachumba, Yandaba, Sobe, Sanje, Shabna, Doshabu, Jidanjimba, Kyondiva, College of Alanma, Adam Menam, Jitumba, Sanje Chumdende, Yandaba, Sobe, Sanje, Juru, Chumdende, Yandaba, Sobe, Sanje, Juru, Shelanama, Yandaba, Sobe, Shajudo, Lungdendo, Shaju, Samba, Shambu, Chambe, the guys in Mena, Sedan, Demba, Sheribu, the Ladam, the Lameda, Sachabe, Chidan, Yiran. Some then they just Pagba Chambesia along Bartudos. Then they enjoy Chambada, Sheribu, that in the true to Lechan Yungua. You know, Sanjay go to Ken, Tambune. The shoot engine about Joaton and Choton Song, Shanda Mason to Mamabana, take the Shaggy, some corner. Tata Tumba Sanjay Chumden, now you're. This was the Cochilla Becar and Dora. Shana Sumbeka, Chingina Beca, Chesuna Becase. Sanje Karendo, oh, did you?
So again, this kind of individual who has an understanding of emptiness will not think about the present. What is this? How is this? What is there? What will this become? From where has this being come? Having departed from this world, where will it go? So here we're just going to read then the rest of this. So in the world, whatever different philosophical views of ascetics and Brahmins there are, so ascetics could refer to those who take renunciation, like for example, becoming monks or nuns. The Jains also have some ascetic practices. So whatever different philosophical views of ascetics and brahmanas there are, namely belief in the self, belief in a life force, belief in a person, belief in the festive and salutary. So there are those who sort of look for good signs and kind of base their ideas upon that. Excessive movement and lack of movement, those views that at that time have been eliminated, comprehended, and uprooted by that one, like the top of a palm tree that does not later appear. They are dharmas that do not arise or cease. So, Reverend Shariputra, if someone possessing such forbearance for the dharma correctly understands this dependent arising, for that one, the Tathagata Arhat, complete Buddha, the one endowed with knowledge and good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, captain who disciplines beings, the unsurpassed, the teacher of gods and humans, Buddha, the blessed one, will predict the unsurpassed, perfectly complete enlightenment, saying, you will become a perfectly complete Buddha. And so the Bodhisattva great being, Maitreya, having spoken thus, the venerable Shariputra and the world of humans, gods, asuras, and Gandharvas rejoicing, praised the explanation by the Bodhisattva, the great being Maitreya. The noble Mahayana Sutra, entitled The Rice Seedling, is completed. So here again, the Buddha had taught this initial phrase of whoever sees dependent arising sees the Dharma, and whoever sees the Dharma sees the Buddha, but he didn't teach then beyond that. So Shariputra went and asked Maitreya, what is the meaning of this? And so it is really through the Buddha's kind of power, through the Buddha's blessings, that this exchange between Maitreya and Shariputra took place. And it is then, this is kind of like speech of the Buddha that is empowered, or another is empowered to or blessed to give the speech of the Buddha. So this is what has occurred then throughout the Rice Seedling Sutra, is really the intention of the Buddha as explicated by Maitreya.
Oya Chagar get to Shali Sudan Basudra. They get a power solution bend. The Hotan got the left show, Pevelo Sute. Like Kerala, did it. Oh, Taya Butchoson. Yeah. Oh, dear Karshuda. Sharawasti, duty, Kinding son Duba. Oh, Tamati Solution bend, the Pecha de Chefs, I think I share. And you can not to the Yabu Chingide. Diana de Yakasura. Saba Yange, you are the Sigda, Tendation, that Yange, you are the Sida. It really loved them, but she Haku, remember Shisha, Lapshania, Hamago Gura, the Mato Yabu Chingide, those and Gors, the catching Maria Kashe. Saba Saja in it, those really Labutana, Yang Jaya Jashan, the Chibata, the Chins, all the Shidashema got it. Yabu Shidachoso. Oh, and in the day, under session to Chicago Shita here. Tanda Maubana Yabutina, and the regent what the share so so. Regent what the Chema Sanda what you shall teach Cheman and go to na.
Lare.
Sada, met the pechata to teach that's Janamato, or Namsayum, or to chain, Tamal, Jesuit, Yabucho, so to share, yeah.
No. So I'll just read the title again, as this is the tradition to sort of begin the beginning again, to kind of keep that continuity going. So the Rice Seedling Mahayana Sutra, and here I have engaged in this kind of explanation, although I think that all of you gathered at the nunnery probably have a very good understanding of these things. Maybe there are some who are new who are listening, and so I have given a little bit more explanation of some of these things that kind of come up repeatedly in this text. And so I have done that really for the purpose of those who might not have as much familiarity with it. I think that all of you who are at Srasvati have a good understanding of this material. And I would just like to say I rejoice that we have had the opportunity to give these teachings. It makes me very happy to do so. And as far as starting up the precious garland, Geshe says he needs a little bit of time, maybe a week, to be able to get his texts ready. I'm assuming you all will deal with the scheduling, but we will be continuing then with the precious garland of Nagarjuna. And just to reiterate how wonderful it is that we have been able to go through all of these teachings, and it makes me very happy to have been able to give this to all of you. So we will see you again soon, but take a little break before that.
네, 로자월라 도시에 야부 조소세. 예, 로자 도시.
Just and thank you to the translator. So.
Geshe, thank you so much for these teachings. Whether we're old students or new students, it's always good to hear them again, and the teachings go in deeper, and things that we didn't understand before now become clear. So thank you so much for your perseverance with teaching us again and again, and many texts and many teachings. It's a wonderful thing of the causes and conditions coming together in our precious human rebirths to have these teachings. And Katrina, I cannot thank you enough for your translation. For those of us who never learned Tibetan, you're the link with these teachings. So you worked hard to learn the language and to learn the meaning of the teachings. So thank you very much too.
Thank you. Again, ta tukche na ta di ngamane jangna yang ta yangyar koya di kechemporowa ngansoki koya di saru dogres. Ani ngune chena tukche na kerangi sunru mangbo yores nganso mutune sungche nang yala tukche na she yi. Yeah.
Welcome. Raso, welcome to you.
Yes. And since we have a lot of desire for more teachings, a virtuous kind of desire, then we're requesting both of you to be healthy and to live long and to continue to do what the Buddha said in terms of benefiting sentient beings. That's what you're both doing.
Ta mutune sungche naya la tukche na ani kirang se ringbo shuya di nganso rewa yes karere sana mutune sungche nyaya gi deba yores ra tabden shuronas.
다 우주 잡게 생계만 나시 르바 세고 말에 배자 양내 양도로 나마도 로첨부 손자 거다 다이나 거 집행그래서 우주 잡 양자로 된다지요. 전부 세고 매가 제 가셔 된다 용거래. 아티나 이자게.
In his humility, Geshe is saying that his awareness isn't quite as sharp as it used to be, and so it takes a little bit more effort. He has to read things again and again, but of course he is always happy to do this, even compensating, he says, for his old age. So.
We're aging too.
Nanso sama geru drogreroa.
So we need to put forth more effort.
ya, ucho,
Sunru
ucho.
tengorero, usugyao gores. Koyala.
Ya.
This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, foreland, sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offer to you. May all beings enjoy this pure land. May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path and all spiritual friends who practice it have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Lobsang's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. In the snowy mountain pure land, you're the source of good and happiness. Powerful Tenzing Gyatso Chenrezi, may you stay until samsara ends. The one who, due to his radiant wisdom of vast and profound knowledge, is esteemed amongst teachers of limitless scriptures, who takes care of his students in many skillful ways. May the great Geshe, Yeshi, Thabkhe, have a long life.
그냥 투신하게.
Ya.
여보지요.
Ya.
Record